Off. I hope everyone's enjoyed a fabulous ACR-sponsored lunch. It's now my great pleasure to introduce Lazlo Peter from KPMG to the stage. Lazlo has a bio that is in the book. He's going to come up, we're going to watch a video, he's going to do an active, interactive demonstration. Something you might not know about Lazlo is that he specialises in aerial photography globally, and he sometimes auctions off his beautiful landscape photography for charities that benefit rural and regional Australia. So please join me in welcoming Lazlo.
The first grapes were planted here in the early 1970s. Microclimate is just fabulous. As you can imagine, nice dry summers, long daylight hours, a great location for growing premium cool climate wines.
We're the first three-generation family wine business here in Tasmania. We're the only producer in Tassie that have two single vineyards within the same region that bottle separately.
We see consumers wanting to know more about the origins of their produce and also about what happens to it every step along the supply chain.
I'm absolutely blown away at what goes into a bottle of wine.
The expectation from consumers for Pooley wines is one of provenance. It's about history and quality.
The season, the weather, the soil. Did you pick at the right time? Was this particular clone ready, or was that clone ready a week later?
We strive not to craft our fruit into a specific mould. We strive to enable that fruit to express itself, and that there, for me, is a true mark of quality.
And so it's becoming more important than ever for the systems that underpin collection and presentation of data to be the best in the world. And so the work I do with KPMG Agribusiness and the work that we're doing with KPMG Lighthouse is looking at the critical points across their supply chain.
We grow the fruit, we pick the fruit, we transport the fruit all the way through to our own distribution arm of our business.
I know the guys out here at Pooley Wines are starting to put all of their information into a cloud-based system. I mean, there's a lot of solutions out there that are starting to digitise compliance and regulation measures, but they're just on a digital platform. It's not creating a tamper-proof, trusted system like blockchain.
If anything gets in the way of quality, we stop whatever we're doing and reassess. We invest heavily in acquiring and capturing as many data points as possible. We have a multitude of sensors, both above the ground and below the ground. Evaporation, it's irrigation, soil moisture, wind, temperature, daily mean. We take all of these inputs and they govern our time and allocation of resource into vineyard practices. The solution that KPMG have come forward with, utilising blockchain, so there is technology that is protecting that data and the integrity of the data. And as we expand our operation and we move into the global markets, I believe that consumers are demanding from quality producers assurances and guarantees around these commitments to sustainability, commitments to fruit provenance, commitments to quality. Where we see incredible value being generated through this blockchain technology, through AR, through any kind of app that enables a consumer to engage with that label, where we can tell our story, we can recreate the experience that they have here at Richmond in the cellar door, that's priceless.
The fourth generation is up and running, and who knows beyond that. But I hope that it becomes a name like Hardy's or Penfolds, and I know my parents would be very proud if that happened.
So thank you for having me. My name is Lazlo. I'm also known as the firm's blockchain guy, and my story today is about the 21st century agriculture that is sort of more and more about the engagement with the community for social alliance, as one of my dear colleagues mentioned it, as well as with the consumer, because it's stemming from the change in their diet, the needs to access new markets and being able to consume products in a way that they never done before. If you examine those consumers, we saw that, we heard earlier from speakers that the change and the way we engage with the markets in this region, especially the big markets like India, Indonesia, China, their demand for our products is not necessarily driven by the cost, but is driven by safety, freshness, and the ingredients they can see in those assets that we export from our leafy rolling hills. And in order to do that, we have to justify the premium we are charging for them. That's also an opportunity for us to reimagine how we connect our trade corridors, how do we connect with clients, what kind of story we tell about the product, not to mention that that story has to be sustainable and also test the test of time around fraud and all the challenges we're facing as our product leaving our shores and going to the overseas market. That is costing our industry about 10 to 15 billion globally in terms of falsification and fraud. You probably saw the Benfolds sold in Linz in the Asian market. But it's also helping, or digitizing our trade corridors would help to reduce some of the working capital that is currently piling up in our strategic infrastructures, like as ports and customs. That is between Australia and New Zealand is roughly around $119 billion. That's a staggering number, especially food and agri being the second worst in terms of the tenor between someone exporting something and receiving payments for it, currently standing around 97 days. Building together, however, a true source of provenance and being able to bring back trust into the value chain is quite complex, given there's so a multitude of players and stakeholders in there. And what we find is interesting is the solutions that you see coming up using modern or a little bit eccentric technologies like blockchain or IoTs, and a combination of those is actually trying to reimagine how trade would look like using a reimagined trade corridor, using modern technologies, and actually taking out some of the challenges we see today, not just around provenance, but including food wastage that we're struggling with, combining welfare, sustainability aspects to it, as well as addressing some of the standards and capabilities that we see in the overseas markets. To exemplify this, instead of me talking about slides, actually I'm going to show you a demo. So fortunately, I couldn't connect my phone to my stage, but my colleague Lucy will show my phone looking at the audience, and then pointing to a bottle of wine that I find today. Obviously, you have to check the cable because it's a little bit jiggery. So what you see here is a bottle of wine, a phone that is reading the label, discovering where this bottle of wine is coming from, discovering the vineyard, onboarded some kind of data assets about where the grape types, the location, the climate, the soil. This was the first participant. Later on, there's a cable still jiggering, yeah. If you click on the second, this is the second participant in the value chain. Here we go. Nice. Thank you. So the second participant is the wine producer that started to think about sharing some information about the maturing process of this particular wine, the certificate that can carry the cellar conditions and so on. That is not necessarily a critical element from a consumer perspective, but you can start thinking about wining in your insurance company or your banking or finance provider who are interested in financing your asset as a collateral for your loan, sitting in 5 years in barrels. These are the information that you suddenly start piecing together and creating new value propositions. If you go to the next one, which is the packaging and distribution, you start seeing more information coming from the likes of the GS1 standards, or the light conditions, if they've been stored somewhere, and what kind of IDs and tracking numbers they use to actually piece together the whole value chain. The next one will be about transportation, and the wine is traveling from one place to another, and I would draw your attention for at the second line where it said transport condition 13 degrees, and suddenly this changes to 16 degrees, and the humidity is also moving. This is an integration where you start seeing IoT sensors from your farm or cellar conditions coming in. This is a simulation, of course, that we are not really reading any truck numbers anytime soon, but it can create some kind of overview of how you can trade that information against the quality of your product that is traveling overseas. And lastly, obviously, the distribution. This is just one of the distribution points where consumers can interact with your product. But the main idea here is that the certificate, which is the last point, can be attached to this product independent from the winemaker or the cellar door or the distribution point in such a way that you start creating commercial conditions and certificates that everyone in the supply chain can value, price in, or create a commercial deal that will be a condition of your product. So I got the beep, and this is all from us. Thank you so much for having me. Indeed. That was actually the last part. Thank you.
What a fantastic, very brief insight into some of the projects that KPMG are funding. I think it's where technology is coming and what we've got ahead of us with traceability and blockchain technology is incredible. So thank you very much for sharing with us that little snippet of what you're up to.